I want to start with a kind of a broad State of the Union here for the Big 12. And last year, this is really remarkable, and I think it's lost in the shuffle, but we talk about it a lot, that there's just such a balanced, no idea from week to week what's going to happen in this league. 4 teams. Here's what I'm going to start with. Kansas State, who we're going to talk about as our preseason favorite to win the league, finished 8th last year, and they were pretty good because there were 4 teams at 7-2, 3 teams at 6-3, and Kansas State was not any of those 7 teams. And so if that alone, to me, sort of paints the picture of what this league is capable of being on a Saturday week in, week out basis.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to sum it up. I think what was it? 9 teams had a chance to go to the Big 12 championship game going into week 14 last year. So I think while there may not be a national title contender here, I think week in and week out, there's a ton of parity. There's a ton of close games. There's going to be a ton of chaos. It's great to watch. It's like Big 12 always gets preferential treatment in the last in household on Saturday on all the screens because of all of the meaningful games. But like I said, I don't think the fact there's a national championship contender, despite that lack of one, should not take away from what's going to be another entertaining season in the Big 12. And it is one of, I think, probably the hardest power conference to predict when we sit down and do the magazine.
On top of all of that, the 2 most tenured and established, and you could call successful coaches in the entire conference were a combined 2-16 in the league last year.
I mean, pretty stunning, right? Considering both of those coaches and both of those teams were predicted to finish near the top of the Big 12, kind of getting at the parity, kind of crazy week in and week out things we have talked about. I mean, Utah's offense totally collapsed. Everything about Oklahoma State totally collapsed. Is there going to be a second kind of third act for some of these, for these 2 coaches, Kyle Whittingham and Mike Gundy? I also think both of those coaches, I know we'll get into these teams, but they're kind of on different tracks going into the season because Kyle Whittingham already has the head coach in waiting with Morgan Scalley. Mike Gundy's potentially fighting for his job. Yeah. And the expectation levels are totally different. So just getting at sort of the structure when Kansas, Utah, Oklahoma State, your favorites in the preseason, none of those teams make a bowl. It sort of further illustrates where this conference is right now, week to week chaos.
Not a ton coming out of Big 12 media days either. Obviously, Brett Yormark kind of doubling down on the 5-11 model, which you could argue is not necessarily beneficial for the Big 12. So props and credit to the Big 12 for saying we think this is what's best for college football. That's a shot at you, Big 10, for wanting to continue this automatic bid charade that you're pushing on all of us out here in America. But speaking of coaching changes, let's start with the 2 teams that have 2 new coaches, and they're old coaches. Not only old coaches in general, but old coaches at their schools. So a very unique situation, or just a unique one, as our former podcast host and boss would say. Very unique, redundant.
Sometimes you need that extra emphasis, even if it's not correct, right?
Grammatically, yes. And not the kicker for Kansas State. West Virginia is number 14 in our rankings. Arizona is number 15 in our rankings. And UCF is number 16 in our rankings. We will cover all 16 teams today on the show. But West Virginia comes back with Rich Rod. Of course, Scott Frost returns to UCF, picked dead last in our magazine. And then Arizona, Brett Brennan falling off a map, could be fighting for his job this year. So let's hit these first 3 first to kind of get to sort of cover the 2 new coaches.